For us citizens watching this unfold and thinking about the weight of all of this for our republic and for our government and for this country that we love, at least from my perspective, even as they are bringing back the same witnesses again and again, it is sort of satisfying and grounding and occasionally quite an illuminating thing that this is how we do it. That as part of the impeachment process, yeah, we look at the facts of what the U.S. official or the president purportedly did, and we nail that down. But we also take this time, as we did today, to basically do a national public constitutional law class on who we are and what we stand for and why we're set up this way as a country and how important this all is.
And so we have constitutional bribery here, the high crime and misdemeanor of constitutional bribery against President Trump.
If you conclude that he asked for the investigation of Vice President Biden and his son for political reasons, that is to aid his reelection, then yes, you have bribery here.
I just want to stress that if what we're talking about is not impeachable, then nothing is impeachable. This is precisely the misconduct that the framers created a constitution, including impeachment, to protect against. And if there's no action, if Congress concludes they're going to give a pass to the president here, as Professor Carlin suggested earlier, every other president will say, okay, then I can do the same thing, and the boundaries will just evaporate. And those boundaries are set up by the Constitution, and we may be witnessing, unfortunately, their erosion. And that is a danger to all of us.
Professor Feldman, you were somewhat of an impeachment skeptic at the time of the release of the Mueller report, were you not?
I was.
What's changed for you, sir?
What changed for me was the revelation of the July 25th call and then the evidence that emerged subsequently of the President of the United States, in a format where he was heard by others and now known to the whole public, openly abused his office by seeking a personal advantage in order to get himself reelected and act against the national security of the United States. And that is precisely the situation that the framers anticipated.
What happened in 2016 was bad enough. There is widespread agreement that Russian operatives intervened to manipulate our political process. But that distortion is magnified if a sitting president abuses the powers of his office actually to invite foreign intervention. To see why, imagine living in a part of Louisiana or Texas that's prone to devastating hurricanes and flooding. What would you think if you lived there and your governor asked for a meeting with the president to discuss getting disaster aid that Congress has provided for? What would you think if that president said, I would like you to do us a favor. I'll meet with you and I'll send the disaster relief once you brand my opponent a criminal? Wouldn't you know in your gut that such a president had abused his office, that he'd betrayed the national interest, and that he was trying to corrupt the electoral process? I believe that the evidentiary record shows wrongful acts on that scale here.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.